In Module 5 of our Asbestos Awareness course. In this module, we will discuss some basic points about handling asbestos. A clarification and reminder, though, this is an awareness course only. Thus, the information in this and following modules is solely for your information, so that you will understand what asbestos specialists working around you are doing and why. It is not intended that you use this information to actually handle asbestos yourself. I want to start this module with a basic principle. We must ensure that all friable asbestos-containing material that can be touched by anyone is properly addressed. So let us continue our discussion of how to address asbestos issues. Before we jump right into addressing any asbestos hazards, there is an important preliminary question to ask. Do we even have asbestos? As these pictures demonstrate, asbestos is very hard to identify visually. Thus, if you suspect something may be asbestos, you should test it. Asbestos testing falls into two categories: bulk testing and air testing. Bulk testing tells you whether a material contains asbestos and, if so, what type. Air testing, which we will discuss in more detail later, tells you how much asbestos is in the air that you breathe. Most common test to see if a material contains asbestos is polarized light microscopy, or PLM. This technique takes advantage of the fact that, while light normally vibrates in many directions, light that has passed through a polarized filter vibrates in only one. When this one-directional light is shone through samples, the minerals in the sample change the light in characteristic ways. Through these ways, the technician can identify the minerals, including any asbestos. This image shows how a PLM system works. The light passes through a polarizing filter to produce a light beam that vibrates in only one direction. The beam is then shone through the sample, and the magnified images are read by the technician. This slide shows what the PLM technician is actually seeing. With amosite on the left and chrysotile on the right, you can see the number of fibers increasing as the percentage of asbestos increases. In addition to PLM, other less common bulk tests for asbestos include X-ray diffraction and transmission electron microscopy. While bulk asbestos testing is common, it is not unusual for too few samples to be taken. In most jurisdictions, the regulations or codes establish a minimum number of bulk samples for asbestos testing. This slide shows the list for Ontario. Note that taking only one sample is only allowed in very limited circumstances. Also, the middle column refers to homogeneous material. That means the same material. As a result, for example, if your building has 5 different types of ceiling tiles, you must treat all 5 separately. As the tiles fall under other material, you must take at least 3 samples from each type of tile. Okay, now you have tested and shown that you have asbestos. What now? When we talk about handling and managing asbestos, people often say the removal is the only option. But as this New York Times article points out, that may not always be the case. So what can you do if you find asbestos? There are 3 main options: enclosure, encapsulation, and finally, removal. As the name suggests, enclosure means sealing the asbestos behind an airtight, permanent wall or barrier. This addresses the issue for a long period of time at a modest cost. However, it leaves the asbestos and the stigma associated with it in your workplace. While still requiring regular monitoring to ensure the enclosure is sound, and repairs to the enclosure if it is not. You may even need signs or similar warnings to people that asbestos is behind the barrier. Alternative to enclosure is encapsulation. This entails spraying the asbestos with an adhesive and essentially gluing the fibers down so they cannot become airborne. This is the cheapest option and also allows you to treat asbestos that is in hard-to-reach places. As with enclosure, though, the asbestos is still there. Thus, the encapsulated asbestos still requires regular monitoring to ensure the adhesive is holding, and the adhesive may need to be reapplied. This is a photograph of encapsulated asbestos. The last option is removal. While the only option that actually gets the asbestos out of your workplace, it is also the most expensive. It also carries the highest risk of asbestos exposure. We'll have more to say about removal in the next module. When we discuss handling asbestos, there are two more definitions that come into play. The first is HEPA, or High Efficiency Particulate Air Filter. Such a filter removes 99.97% of particles having an average diameter of 0.3 microns from the air. So what is 0.3 microns? Well, it is about 1/200th the width of a human hair. HEPA filters and respirators, vacuums, or hair handlers equipped with them are the only filters allowed when handling asbestos. But a caution: which of these shop vacs has a HEPA filter and which does not? It is not obvious. Thus, you must be careful and check that the equipment you are using is in fact a HEPA unit. And by the way, the one on the right is the HEPA. The second definition I want to present is wetting. We all know that wet materials release less dust. Thus, wetting asbestos before handling it is a common precaution. But, in technical terms, water has a high surface tension. As this picture shows, it forms beads like on this leaf. As a result, most of the leaf is in fact dry. For dust control, leaving most of the asbestos dry is a bad thing. So what do? We add a chemical, called a surfactant, to the water to decrease the surface tension. As the diagram shows, the surfactant-treated water easily spreads out over the entire surface. But buying surfactant sounds expensive. So are there any common products that are actually surfactants? As it turns out, yes. Most common dish detergents contain the type of surfactants that work with asbestos. And this concludes our discussion of asbestos handling. I invite you now to move on to Module 6, where we will go into some basic information about asbestos removal work.